Chapter 11. Mostly, I felt disbelief while the shuttle took off and broke atmosphere, but once we were in space and the ship loomed ahead of us, it all felt so real. Here I was, sitting with the former delegates from Earth, my friends, headed towards a Confederation starship. Part of me feared it had all been some terrible trick, and we would be flying directly towards a Faddic cruiser. But I was pleased to discover I could cross at least one worst-case scenario off my list. The ship looked a lot like the Dependable, a long, unordained black rectangle with a pair of engines at the end and another along the middle. "What's it called?" I asked Urch. He snorted with distaste.
"The Kind Disposition."
"Ew," I said. "Oh, here we go," Mi-san said, rolling her eyes.
"It is not the most intimidating of names,"
Urch agreed.
"However, this vessel has weapons upgraded based on the technology you brought to the Confederation. If the Fads bother us, they'll find the ship's disposition not nearly as kind as they would wish."
"I can't argue with that," I said, enjoying his bravado. "How do you like serving on the ship?"
"Captain Hyai is not Captain Quassel, but he is an excellent commander."
"And the crew?" I asked, remembering what my father had said.
"Do not trust anyone but me,"
Urch said darkly.
"I was only brought in because you know and trust me. The other officers seem to resent me for it. Many of them open belong to the Movement for Peace, but I believe even the ones without armbands are members as well. They simply wish to disguise that the entire crew serves Junip, not the captain. As for me, they shun me because my species is carnivorous."
"That sounds uncomfortable." He snorted.
"It has been worth it to aid the director on this mission. I have a great deal of admiration for her, but don't repeat anything she says to any of the crew, except, of course, the captain."
"Isn't he going to get irritated if we act like we don't trust his crew?"
"I'm not sure Captain Hyai trusts them either. The roster was forced upon him by Junip's allies. This ship has been newly retrofitted to be state-of-the-art, and Captain Hyai wanted to command it. To do so, he had to accept a crew of Junip's choosing."
Colonel Rage broke into our conversation, pointing at the screen. "That ship looks pretty impressive. But does it have it where it counts? What kind of firepower does it possess?"
"I cannot answer that question in relative terms," Urch said. "I can tell you that we match weapons with the most destructive of enemy cruisers, and while we equal them in offensive capabilities, their shield and sensor technologies are generations behind ours. That means we can see the enemy before they see us, and we can take more damage. As a result, we will win any battle so long as our forces are not outnumbered more than 6-1.
"That sounds like a lot of boasting, son," Colonel Rage said. Urch, to my surprise, did not respond to being called son. Instead, he activated his data bracelet and changed the view of the screen. It panned several degrees up and left, and then something came into view. It was the floating wreckage of 2 Faddic saucers, lifeless and dark, hovering in the void.
"We did not want to alarm you with this while still on your planet," Urch said. "But shortly after Zeke left the Confederation, the Faddic Empire decided to take revenge upon him and his planet for having shamed them. Here, in your system, is where they learned we had mastered their weapons technology and were no longer going to ignore their violent expansion. For years we watched powerless as the Fads conquered peaceful worlds, but that ended at your world. 4 of our ships made this change of policy clear to the Fads, destroying, disabling, or capturing 14 large cruisers that had come to conquer Earth." My stomach did a series of unpleasant flips. My planet had been threatened, almost attacked by a devastating force of nasty aliens. None of us had known anything about it. "When did this happen?" Colonel Rage asked. "Perhaps 3 months ago," Urch said. "Our interstellar spy drones picked up the first signs that the Fads were building a subspace energy relay on your or near your planet. It's the first sign of colonization, since their occupation forces are very energy dependent. The usual operation procedure for the Phatic Empire is to establish infrastructure and then invade. When we moved in to destroy that infrastructure, they launched an attack against our forces.
You went to war to save our planet? Misan asked, clearly surprised. When we'd last left the Confederation, politicians like Junip had seemed more interested in hiding from the Fads than confronting them. Urch nodded, clearly understanding what she meant.
Last year, the Confederation was still hiding behind treaties and agreements meant to appease the Fads. The ships you and your friends captured changed all that. It is fitting that the Battle of Earth is regarded as one of the great turning points in our civilization.
I am grateful, Charles said. I thank you for doing this for us.
Urch snorted. I wasn't there, unfortunately. Though there were other battles I had the chance to savor before the Fads agreed to a new treaty. But as far as I'm concerned, no thanks are necessary. Helping weaker worlds fend off bullies is the responsibility of the Confederation. You are wise to be cautious with anyone who wants anything from you, but Delector Glee-Wixix did save your world.
And Junip? I asked. Did he support protecting Earth?
He warned of the risks and urged the Confederation not to endanger itself on behalf of primitive worlds. Then, when the battle ended so decisively and the Fads were in full retreat, he revised his position, claiming he had supported it all along.
Not surprising, I said. Urch shrugged.
He's a political perspiration licker who will throw his best friend in the recycler unit to save his own shell.
Then whatever Glee-Wixix wants from me, Junip is probably going to be against.
I think that goes without saying,
Urch agreed.
You will have to be careful.
Your ships, Colonel Rage said, interrupting my thoughts. They're good at fighting these Fads now, you say?
That is right.
And your other enemies?
We have no other enemies, Urch told him. The Confederation seeks neither hostility nor territory. The Fads were our enemies only because they chose the path of conquest and oppression. Now we have confined them to their borders.
What about the planets they've already conquered? Misan asked.
Yes, there are beings such as Glee-Wixix who believe we are obligated to liberate them. However, Junip's faction has swayed public opinion, and the current position of the government is that we have weakened the Fads, so now it is up to those individual societies to determine their own fates.
And what do you think? Colonel Rage asked.
I know that if it were my world that had been conquered, I would not wish for the Confederation to turn its back.
Can't blame you there, Colonel Rage said. Sounds like your leadership is trying to avoid a long and expensive war, using bogus morality to cover up caution and selfishness. We get plenty of that on Earth. Don't you worry.
All sentient beings do have much in common,
Urch said.
It is our linked ancestry.
Colonel Rage stared at Urch for a moment, as if not wanting to think too much about how this warthog being could be his cousin. What happens if this internal disagreement in your government turns ugly? How do these upgraded ships of yours do when fighting each other?
Confederation ships do not fight one another, Urch said. For most of our citizens, argument and disagreement are all the conflict they could stomach.
Still, it's best to be prepared. Surely you run scenarios. It can be done in a sim, I said. When we get to the kind disposition, I'll show you how to work the simulation room. I think you'll like it. I was looking forward to getting back in the sim room myself. I had missed spaceflight, simulated or otherwise. We pulled into the shuttle bay, where we were met by several of the crew, including Captain Hyai, a stick insect alien like I'd seen on the Dependable. He was surrounded by beings of a variety of species, in uniforms, all of whom wore blank expressions. Some were aliens I had seen before, like the blood-red humanoids with cranial ridges, and even a goat turtle like Junip, with a black uniform stretched awkwardly over his shell. All of them looked at me with barely disguised contempt. These were not the welcoming smiles I had encountered the first time I'd come aboard a Confederation ship.
"Anything to report, Mr. Urch?"
Captain Hyai asked.
"No difficulties, Captain,"
Urch said. He then proceeded to make introductions. When the captain had met all of us, he presented each of us to his crew, none of whom seemed happy to meet us. They were crisp and precise in their discipline, but I had the feeling they were doing their best to show us how much they didn't want us on board, while making sure they did nothing to get themselves in trouble.
"Mr. Reynolds," the captain said, "Director Glee-Wixix understands that you have been through an ordeal and asks if you and the rest of your people from your planet could meet her tomorrow at 1300 hours.
I nodded. Of course, Captain.
Then perhaps you would like to go to your quarters.
The goat turtle stepped forward. On its right arm, I noticed, was a black band with a squiggly line that I thought might be supposed to represent a flame. Captain, permission to escort the primitive alien Ezekiel Reynolds to its quarters. Its voice was deep, like Junip's, though he sounded much younger, and the number 32 above his head confirmed it. I couldn't tell just by looking at him, since it's hard to guess someone's age when their face is covered with shaggy fur.
"Very kind of you, Mr. Nutjob," the captain said, "but I think we'll let Mr. Urch have that honor."
Don't do it, Smelly roared inside my head. An entity doesn't have to live inside your head to know what you're thinking. Control yourself. It was great advice. Really, it was, but I was unable to resist. Nut job? I asked. Colonel Rage winced. Knut job, the goat turtle repeated very slowly. Does my name signify something in your language? Just sounding it out, I said casually. It's been a while since I've heard non-human names, but Nut job. I like it. There was a moment of silence. It's always a pleasure to be flattered, Nutjob said, leveling his goaty gaze at me, by the sort of being who might break numerous laws and codes of the society that's hosting him, steal a starship, betray trust, and create an interstellar incident. That is a rather biased view of what happened, Charles said. Nutjob snorted. Name mockery is precisely the sort of irresponsible behavior my uncle told me to expect from you. Wait a minute, I said. Junip is your uncle? I'm in an enclosed space with Junip's nephew.
There will be no hostilities or rivalries aboard my ship, Captain Hyai said, like a teacher trying to break up a fight between little kids. Mr. Nutjob, you will avoid Mr. Reynolds as best as your duties permit. Please refrain from speaking to him unless it directly relates to ship business. Mr. Reynolds, the same goes for you. Not a problem, I said. Crew dismissed, Captain Hyai said with evident weariness. Mr. Urch, please take our guests to their quarters. I can't believe this, I said, as soon as we were away from everyone else. Why is Junip's nephew on this ship?
Obviously to keep an eye on things, Urch said. You wasted no time in antagonizing him.
He was looking to start something, I said. Besides, it's not my fault. He has a funny name. What was I supposed to do? Try not insulting him, Misan suggested. Avoid making trouble for once in your life. I only make trouble sometimes, I said. That's true, Nyana said. I've seen it happen. I think about a third of the time the trouble is of his own making. The other 2/3, trouble looks for him. It's still a lot of trouble, Misan grumbled. Let's try not to make any more trouble with anyone else, Colonel Rage suggested. Especially when they're related to powerful people in the government who happen to hate you. That is excellent advice, Smelly offered. I have a bad feeling about this, Charles said. It is not merely that he looks like his uncle, whom we all have reason to dislike.
It appears to me that he wished for a confrontation with Zeke, and Zeke merely provided an excuse. I believe this is a setup.
Thanks, Charles, I said. I agree.
As do I, Ert said. Nutjob clearly has adopted his uncle's grievances as his own. Additionally, I consider him a barf puddle of an officer. They all are, I'm afraid.
The interior of the ship looked a lot like the other Confederation vessels I'd been on, but there was no doubt that changes had been made to accommodate the new military power. Every few yards there were signs pointing the way to escape pods or impact shelters, and every junction were panels to operate emergency decompression barriers. The Dependable had been designed to avoid and escape conflict, but the kind disposition had been built to dominate it. By the time I got to my quarters, I was exhausted. It had been a grueling bunch of days, filled with terrors and surprises, the majority of which it had turned out were not bad. I awoke the next day with a knock on the door. Urch was standing outside, holding a length of glistening black material for me. A data bracelet. Without hesitating, I grabbed it and put it on my left wrist. Thanks, man. I've really missed having one of these. He nodded.
It is easy to grow used to them. I am also here to tell you that we have received a communication. Our diplomats have successfully negotiated asylum for the rural girl Tamret. Final arrangements are being made, and she will most likely arrive on Confederation Central several days after you do. I am informed that she is in good health.
I sat down on my bed and let out a sigh of relief, as relief washed over me. Whatever nightmare Tamret had endured, it was finished. Maybe it was terrible, more terrible than I could imagine, but she was alive, and she was free. I had promised her I would get her off that planet, and I'd done it. If this excursion to Confederation Central accomplished nothing else, then I would consider it a victory. And I was going to see her again. In only a few more days, Tamret and I would be back together. And Steve? I asked.
Yes, the Ishi is also on his way, but you seem more interested in the girl.
Urch opened his mouth to show his teeth, his version of a smile. Maybe a little bit, I admitted.
I understand. The Ishi sent a message.
Urch activated his data bracelet and sent Steve's message to me. As if I had never taken my bracelet off, I called it up. It was a single line of text.
You still owe me, mate.
I laughed, and my mood suddenly soured. Was there a message from Tamret? I asked.
Sorry, Urch said. Nothing.
Why had she not thought to send me a few lines? I wondered. Maybe she was too busy. She was overwhelmed by everything that was going on. Maybe everything she did and said would be monitored until she left planet, and whatever she had to say she wanted to keep private. It was a small thing, I told myself, and decided not to worry about it. Urch called up a blue plasma sphere from his bracelet. It had buttons all over it, and it rotated as he tapped them.
The room is now secure, he said. I detect no listening devices, but we are nevertheless shielded now. I think anyone but Captain Hyai and myself would report suspicions to Junip. And I know that Nutjob is looking to discredit your mission, whatever it is, before it begins.
Yeah, I said. I'm not popular with goat turtles.
I have known several of their species who are worthy and honorable beings, Urch said. That family, however, is ambitious and ruthless. In any case, we may speak now without fear of being heard.
Okay, I said cautiously. Clearly, he had something private he wanted to say.
When Charles and me son and Nyana arrived, he began, I had to inject them with nanites so they could understand me. I gave you an injection, since to do otherwise would have been conspicuous, but you did not need the nanites to understand me.
I said nothing.
The Confederation treated you shamefully,
Urch said.
Beings like us who come into this culture from the outside have no innate devotion to it, no patriotism that we are born to. Loyalty must be earned, and I know the Confederation did not earn it with you. It is no exaggeration to say that the Confederation betrayed you, so I would understand if you had been tempted to turn your back on it. But if that is the case, you must tell me now. We can deal with the situation if you reveal everything, but the longer you wait, the more suspect your concealment will seem.
Wait a second, I said, hardly believing what I was hearing. Do you think I was working with the Fads?
I am saying only you had access to technology that should have been unavailable. The Fads are the most likely source.
I blame Junip for what happened, not the Confederation, and I would never work with the Fads. They murdered the Gurnari kids who were supposed to be delegates for their planets. They tried to destroy a ship I was on, several times, and tried to have me brought back to their world for punishment. They imprisoned my father, and they were looking to invade or destroy my planet. Do you seriously think I would join up with them? For what? So I could watch kung fu movies without subtitles?
I said the Fads were the most likely source, he explained. But I agree, not the only one. Perhaps you would enlighten me?
Have you reported this to anyone? I asked him.
I wished to speak with you first.
I took a deep breath. I couldn't have Urch thinking I was a traitor. And though I didn't want to tell anyone what Dr. Roop had done, he was already a fugitive and probably couldn't get into much more trouble. Dr. Roop did something before I left the station last time. He kept my translation systems working. He hinted about it, but I didn't pick up on it until after I left Confederation Central. I tried to scratch my ear, but I couldn't lift my hand. Calm your minuscule mind, meatbag, Smelly said. In case this creature knows enough of psychology to monitor you, I am concealing the physical manifestations of lying. I'm keeping your heart rate at a normal pace. I am preventing your eyes from shifting to the left, and I am not allowing you to touch your face. So I stopped trying to touch my face, hoping Smelly would free me up. I could now feel a slight relaxation, as if an invisible hand let me go. You're welcome. I suppose Smelly was right. I should thank it. Obviously, I didn't want anyone rooting around in my brain trying to scrape it out. Urch was a friend, but once he knew, there was always the risk someone else might find out.
Interesting, Urch said. Roop obviously had something in mind, though I can't guess what. I was surprised he ran rather than face the legal system, but clearly he was more desperate than I realized.
You won't tell anyone about all this, will you?
I'm not sure that it would get you into any trouble, but if they catch Roop, I would hate for him to face any more charges just because he wanted to help you out. I think we can keep this between us.
He pressed some buttons on his rotating keyboard, presumably to deactivate the dampening field.
I'm not sure how you broke into that military base. Maybe no one else will notice. Most Confederation types don't really know what to expect on a place like Earth. But my planet was not unlike yours before we joined. I know you must have faced great danger.
I had to help my friends, I said.
It must have been some help for you to get that far without anyone getting hurt.
I shrugged. We were lucky, I guessed. Urch stared at me. I felt for sure he knew I was lying. Smelly was likely keeping me from any physical betrayal, but Urch was no dummy. He clearly suspected I got more from Dr. Roop than just a universal translator. I had to hope he'd believe I would never work with the Fads, and as long as I wasn't cooperating with the enemy, he was probably okay with me having my own secrets. Just then, both of our data bracelets chimed, almost at the exact same moment. I looked at mine, and a text message popped up. Report to the brig.
I must go to the brig,
Urch told me. Yeah, me too. Why was I needed there, of all places? Had one of the other humans already gotten into trouble aboard the ship? I couldn't believe any of my friends would have done anything improper, but Colonel Rage was an unknown, to say the least. Even so, if he'd decided that he wanted to try and steal Confederation secrets, I doubted he would have gotten started quite so quickly.
I followed Urch through the corridors and down a flight of stairs. When we found the captain and Colonel Rage standing by a closed door.
"We've got a problem,"
Colonel Rage said, gesturing towards the door with one of his hands.
"Stowaway in the shuttle,"
Captain Hiei said. The captain moved to open the door, but I knew what I was going to see. The door shifted to the side with a hiss, revealing a chamber with a main control panel and 3 cells, 2 of which were empty and dark, the third illuminated and blocked by a blue plasma field. And on the other side, hands in her lap, was Alice.